If you visit Modena today, you can find this bucket. It's a simple, rusted wooden pail held together by heavy iron bands. According to a highly shared internet legend, two medieval Italian city-states went to war simply because some soldiers snuck across the border and stole this specific piece of hardware from a town well. That comedic tale completely misrepresents history. The reality was a massive, highly organized military engagement involving nearly 39,000 heavily armed soldiers marching into combat. When the armies collided, the fighting was horrific. By the time the dust settled, around 2,500 men were left dead or wounded on the battlefield. To understand why this happened, we must look at the two factions involved. On one side was the wealthy, populated northern city-state of Bologna. Right next door to them was their bitter rival, the city-state of Modena.
This map shows how these two neighbors were caught in a much larger 300-year ideological struggle. Bologna was a Guelph city, meaning they were loyal to the Pope in the south. Modena was Ghibelline, heavily backed by the Holy Roman Emperor to the north. These two neighbors were fighting a bloody proxy battle in a continent-spanning war for political control over Europe. By the summer of 1325, the underlying political tension finally snapped, giving way to an intense cycle of retaliatory border violence. The escalation began in July, when Bolognese forces crossed into Modenese territory and systematically destroyed their agricultural fields by fire and sword for weeks. Modena struck back with a high-stakes military betrayal. They convinced dissidents inside the strategic Bolognese fortress of Monteviglio to hand the castle over to them, leading to the immediate decapitation of two defending commanders. This prompted an extreme response from the Vatican. Pope John XXII declared Modena's leader a rebel against the Church. He offered crusader-level indulgences, full spiritual pardons usually reserved for holy wars, to anyone who attacked Modena's ruler or his property. With papal backing, Bologna mustered a punishing army of 32,000 men and marched directly on Modena in November. The capture of a vital military stronghold like Monteviglio, combined with extreme religious decrees from the Pope, left absolutely no room for diplomacy. Both cities had pushed past the point of no return, guaranteeing total war. The two armies finally met at a place called Zappolino, located well inside Bolognese territory. A relatively small Modenese defense force had marched out to intercept the invaders. Looking at this tactical map, you can see the staggering numerical disadvantage. Modena fielded just 7,000 troops against 32,000 Bolognese men. Despite being outnumbered nearly 5-1, the Modenese aggressively pushed forward, completely shattering the Bolognese lines at sunset. The massive Guelph army panicked. What followed was a chaotic, desperate retreat as thousands of surviving Bolognese soldiers broke formation and fled for their lives back toward the safety of their own city walls. The Battle of Zappolino was a catastrophic military disaster for the vastly superior Guelph forces, completely upending the local balance of power. This is the exact moment where the famous wooden bucket actually enters the historical record. It was taken after the battle was already over, as Modenese soldiers chased their fleeing enemies all the way to the city gates of Bologna. According to the accounts, the victorious soldiers stopped at a well just outside the walls, unhooked the bucket, and carried it home as a deliberate, spiteful trophy to rub salt in the wounds of their defeated rivals.
Modena won this specific fight, but the bloodshed didn't stop there. The overarching struggle between the Guelphs and Ghibellines dragged on for another 2 centuries. The widespread factional violence only truly ended in 1529, when Charles I of Spain seized imperial power in Italy and effectively forced the exhausted city-states into a peace treaty. By the 17th century, the reality of the conflict had faded, but the story of the stolen bucket remained. It inspired the Italian poet Alessandro Tassoni to write a massive mock-heroic epic poem about the event, which later became the basis for a full theatrical opera. A massive ideological war that pitted popes against emperors and cost thousands of lives largely vanished from public memory. In its place, we are left with the legend of a stolen pail. We tend to think of wars purely in terms of grand geopolitical stakes and sweeping religious edicts. But history shows that they are just as often remembered for acts of petty, deeply human pride, cementing this simple wooden bucket as the ultimate medieval insult.